When you dare to share, you break the silence. When you dare to share, you speak your truth. When you dare to share, you use the full strength of your voice. When you dare to share, it brings opportunity to own your story. So tell it, be heard, and at the same time, your sharing is someone else's learning, inspiration, motivation, empowerment, and hope. There's always an element to each of our stories that remains a secret. For some, we feel it's a dirty little secret. Dare to share your untold story exposes these secrets in a welcoming and positive way. I encourage each of you out there to dare yourself to share what is yours to tell. When we dare, it is the courage to do something really important. Let this be a vow to each and every single one of us that we take risk, we brave, confront, and face what is, while inspiring and empowering all communities. So let's break that silence and tap into mental beauty. This is Salima Jadavji, your podcast host, a practicing social worker, and your mental wellness connoisseur. Welcome to the Dare to Share Your Untold Story podcast, episode number 78, the overbearing feeling of limitation and its detriments to his mental health combined with grief. To all my fellow listeners, before we get started, I'm just dropping in a note to give you a heads up that this podcast might be emotionally triggering for you. We do invite guests onto the show who share openly about extremely difficult life moments with exposure and impact of what the struggles have been like. The intensity of each episode could have a variable impact on your emotional and mental well-being based on your own personal story. If at any point the topic becomes uncomfortable or upsetting to you in any way, please do not pressure yourself to listen. Instead, be kind to yourself, do some self-care, and perhaps give another episode a try. Today, I have the pleasure of introducing our courageous and daring guest, Dawson Wood. Dawson is an award-winning designer and entrepreneur based out of Calgary, Alberta. After a successful final year of 2022 at Emily Carr University of Art and Design, Dawson's toy-focused industrial design project, known as Red Boy and the Adventure Crew, gained lots of good feedback and eventually became his first product in his new toy company, Playmix Interactive. Growing up, Dawson flourished with the latest in pop culture. As such, he has a love for classic film and TV, Lego, and Dungeons and Dragons. Dawson believes that any project is worth a spark of creativity. Projects that he's involved in are always jam-packed with imagination and what some would call a youthful optimism. This is also what drives the passion of toy making. As well, he's worked on various projects in the digital media space, including video game products for Bakugan, Sesame Street, and YouTube. Well, hello, Dawson. Welcome to the Dare to Share Your Untold Story podcast. Yes, welcome.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it a ton. Thanks for your time. This is great.
Amazing. Dawson, let me tell you how it's so great to have this opportunity to have you on as a guest to come on the show today. I'm truly grateful for your willingness to be here and the fact that you're willing and excited to share your story. For me, it's a continuous blessing. It really continues to be a blessing and an honor to encounter guests like yourself who just you just give me permission to tap into their vulnerabilities and draw from their strength and insight and inspiration. These are really integral things that get shared in this space. So it's important that we take a stance together to help break barriers of mental stigma.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. And so, Dawson, in case you're still wondering, this podcast is all about bringing forward untold stories that people go through, whether it's directly about a mental health struggle or something else. And one thing that we know is that no matter what the story is, there is impact on one's own mental health in some way, which typically remains tucked away. And this platform that's been created here, it serves in a way to break these barriers of mental stigma that have been conditioned in our society. So today, together, my hopeful mission is for both of us to encourage people to share and tell what individuals typically have reservation to express. And of course, I continue to bring forward a trend, and it's called the mental beauty rethink. So, Dawson, tell me, what comes to mind? Like, what comes to your immediate mind when you hear this phrase, the mental beauty rethink?
The mental beauty rethink.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to mind, immediately what strikes out at me is when we talk about mental health.
Mm-hmm.
And what's really important to me in this is the linguistics use, because we can talk about health and we can say, oh, are you in good health or are you in bad health type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very binary term.
Mm-hmm.
When we switch over to using mental beauty,
Mm-hmm.
you're removing the binariness from it, and you're turning it into an abstraction.
Mm-hmm.
Is it good? Is it bad? And truly, just like beauty, it's all in the beholder,
Right.
and it brings the control back to you.
Yeah.
I believe.
Yeah, I love it. I love the way you articulated that. Oftentimes, throughout different conversations that I have with people, we do talk about it being in the eye of the beholder, but I really like your spin and your detail towards, speaking about it from the angle of binary and removing the binary from it and really pinpointing that it's linguistics, right? It's the language. For me, it was about doing something, creating something rather, that's invitational and opening. And yes, the abstract allows us to step away from something being right or wrong or good or bad, but just here's what it is. And can we embrace what is? Like all
Yeah,
parts.
absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you very much. That was very insightful. Amazing insight.
Oh, you're welcome. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, Dawson, let's get down to business. We're doing an interview today on your untold story. So, I hope you're ready.
I am as ready as I'll ever be.
Amazing. That's exactly what I was hoping to hear. All right. Here's our first question. Dawson, give us the newspaper headline of how you would title your untold story. What would it say?
Newspaper headline. I got this.
Mm-hmm.
A devastating combo of family loss and internal struggles finally begs the question, am I made for this?
Okay, say that one more time, please.
Yeah. A devastating combo of family loss and internal struggles finally begs the question, am I made for this?
Wow. Okay. Such an intriguing title. This devastating combo, loss, internal struggle, this question, am I made for this? Okay, you're going to have to give us a little background. How did you arrive at this title? What does this title mean to you?
Yeah, so the story of this title takes place in 2021. It's my third year of university, and so many things are coming down at once. Obviously, with my family struggle having a huge impact on my mental health, and factors in and around school that at the same time really made me question if I was good enough, made me question if I was meant to do this, made me question why I'm here.
Okay. Well, then the fact that you're, sharing all of these details about where this comes from and that it stems from third year university of 2021 and all of the different factors that were sort of coming to heads, it sounds like you're ready to really dive in and tell us your untold story.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's do that. Tell us what your untold story is all about. Give us that snapshot.
Yeah, hopefully I can structure this in a way that makes sense, but I'll go as slow as possible. Feel free to interrupt me anytime.
Okay.
We'll wind the clock back a little bit. I'm not going to spend too much time talking about this. When I refer to family struggles and family illness, I'm referring to my grandmother who had Alzheimer's, and
Okay.
that was a battle that lasted about 7-8 years.
Mm-hmm.
And at the apex of that 8 years, I was in my third year of university.
Mm-hmm.
So seeing my loving grandmother go through, to say the least, the battle of Alzheimer's and the effects of that. It brought me down a lot. It sort of triggered a depressive episode
Mm-hmm.
for me that lasted about 6 months. And
Mm-hmm.
within that time, everything in my school life
Mm-hmm.
sort of began to crumble around that
Right.
episode.
Right. Okay. And so now your grandma having Alzheimer's, and you said that, it was really difficult to witness some of the things that you were privy to. So what was that like for you?
It changed. It was an ever changing mindset, because this had, first started happening when I was 13, 14.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was younger, it was scary. It was scary
Mm-hmm.
to see my grandmother go through all these different
Mm-hmm.
behavioral changes,
Mm-hmm.
forgetfulness. And as I got older, it really turned into a grieving or a mourning period that lasted over the course of maybe like 2 3 years. Because, yeah, to put it bluntly,
Mm-hmm.
she was gone before we lost her.
Okay.
Yeah,
So she just wasn't herself. So things that she was saying or doing, it just wasn't who you grew up knowing. Did it feel like a stranger?
it felt like a stranger
Mm-hmm.
until there was no character at all. It
Okay.
had progressed to the point where she just wasn't speaking, wasn't eating. It was so difficult to witness
Mm-hmm.
that I actually stopped going to see her,
Mm. Right.
which was tough.
Yeah, what was
Yeah.
that like? Yeah, if it was tough, I'm sure there were different things that you were experiencing that you'd internalized.
Yeah, I think not going was a little bit of a savior for me, because it let me hide my emotions at the time.
Mm-hmm.
It let me not go through this the fear and
Mm-hmm.
the uncomfort of the healthcare facility that we were in, because I
Mm-hmm.
hate hospitals. I hate
Mm-hmm.
all that stuff. As well, I also caught a little bit of flack from family
I'm sure.
for not
Were you
wanting to
the only
go,
one who
which
wasn't going and others were?
I think some people didn't end up, like my brother didn't end up going, not out of choice though. I think he was just preoccupied.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember one event in particular on Christmas Day,
Mm-hmm.
we actually went to go see her, and I refused to go in. I
Mm.
refused to go in. I caught some slack from my dad and my brother.
Because you were there and then you weren't able to go in.
Yeah, I stood up for myself and I said, "This is too tough,"
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
because it's painful to witness.
Yeah. It sounds like you had a very deep and close connection with your grandma.
I did. Yeah. She always lived next door to
Oh,
us
wow.
most of the time. Yeah. Either she lived next door, or we simply lived in her house.
Okay.
So she was always around.
Yeah.
She was taking care of us after school.
Mm-hmm.
Like our number one fans, me and my brother. Like
Yeah.
she was there.
Yeah. And so it sounds like that gives us a good understanding of what you meant by family struggles and illness. And I'm curious if there were other factors, outside of what was happening with your grandma that you were experiencing that might have put stress on you.
If I told you about a mysterious depression that entered my life around the same time, would you believe me? Because that is sort of also what happened. I almost want to say just miraculously, like a seasonal depression hit me.
Okay.
And that was a struggle too.
You had a depressive episode of 6 months, right? So, and
Yeah.
school started to crumble and
Yeah, before we actually go into more details about the depressive episode, I want to paint a little bit of a stronger picture of what's happening in my life at this time. So it's 2021. I'm living by myself. The school year is starting, so this is September. The COVID restrictions are loosening up, so in-person classes are beginning, and going back into school since the summertime
right.
had really made me think about the excellence and this sort of shadow imposter syndrome that happens in
Hmm.
design school.
Okay.
You can design the coolest thing ever, but there is always going to be someone, multiple people even, who are putting in the same effort as you,
Hmm.
but in your eyes, in my eyes, will always be better.
Mm.
And a lot of the time I ended up asking myself, oh, why can't I do something as cool as Alex? Or I wish I did something as inventive as Emma's project.
Mm. Hmm.
So that was always a looming thought. Going into third year, I thought, okay, well, this is probably a time where I can really prove myself.
Right. So this proving yourself, but this when you talk about proving yourself, you're talking about and these other people that you're contending with it, you're all trying to excel and exceed and come up with that thing. That must have been a lot of pressure.
It was a lot of pressure internally.
Yeah. I guess there's a lot of internal pressure, like pressure that you end up putting on yourself or that people in your situation in that field are putting it on themselves, especially this idea that you need to be a design extraordinaire.
Yeah, especially in the class that I come from. Everyone's a genius in that
Oh
class.
gosh. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Right.
And so going into third year, I
Right.
thought, okay, let's make something cool. To
Okay.
prove to anyone on the outside, maybe, but it was more to prove to myself
Okay.
that I was worthy of this position.
Mm-hmm.
And I get into this group project. It's myself and it's three other people. And as we go through the strides and we go through the development of this project, I was not putting in enough effort as I would have liked to, and I was certainly not putting in enough effort that they would have liked to.
Mm.
So in the midst of what's happening with my grandmother and the midst of everything else, I have been removed from this project right at the very end too.
Oh my goodness.
With that causes the most uncomfortable meeting I've had with a university professor ever.
Mm-hmm.
Did not do well for how I perceive myself.
Yeah, did you have a meeting with the professor? Like, did you guys talk about it?
Yeah, we did.
Okay.
We did, and it was interesting because this particular professor I never seen as someone who was super empathetic or
Mm-hmm.
fully understanding. And throughout this whole time, I was also very scared to talk about it because at that rate, it was just an excuse. Like who was going to hear me out?
Mm-hmm.
And so I spoke to this professor, and I actually found out that a little bit of confidentiality was broken at the school.
Oh,
Professor says to me, "Oh, yeah, like I heard about your grandmother and so on and so forth." And I'm thinking to myself, I did not tell you that.
right. Like, how did he learn? Like, who did he talk to? Like, you must have had so many questions in your mind like that when you heard him say that out loud.
Yeah. And like we got through it. I think I got like a D or a C minus in that class. So I didn't fail.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the conversation, he said, I think you should take a break from school. I don't think you
Mm.
should go back in December.
Mm-hmm.
And that gave me tons and tons of conflicting ideas.
Mm. Do you feel like you were reading into his suggestion or guidance of take a break from school? Did you hear it as don't continue school? Like you're not made for this?
Yeah, I think so. I definitely, regardless of what,
Yeah, what his words were or what his intention was.
but what I absorbed from that
Yeah.
was, maybe you're not really you're not really for this, which sucked. Which sucked because being a creative person and being a designer, I've built my whole personality around.
Mm-hmm.
So having
Mm-hmm.
someone tell me, "Hey, either take a break or don't come back to this for a year and a bit," was hampering to my self image and the way I perceive myself as a designer.
Sure. And while you were going through this and your family was going through the struggles with your grandma's illness, did your family have any idea what you were going through on your own with school?
No, I don't think so. Of course, I didn't want to instill fear in anyone. I don't want to scare my parents. I don't want to scare my family. So I kept it to myself for the most part.
So it was really feeling like a lone journey that you were on, trying to
Yeah,
make sense of things and what you were absorbing and what was the narratives you were telling yourself versus
yeah,
what your professor might have actually meant is, you're going through a lot. So take a pause and come back when you're in your best place. But you might not have heard that, right? That's not how you took it. You took it as possibly someone not believing that you have what it takes.
yeah, absolutely.
And then feeling like, I have this going on at school and I've got this going on with my grandma. I'm sure there was so many different thoughts and spiraling for you and maybe several on repeat or different variations of the same thoughts regarding all the stress and worry. And it must have really taken a toll.
It really did.
Hmm.
It really did, because that led to almost an entire summer thinking about it.
Right. So you're just dwelling on it the entire summer.
Yeah.
Dawson, in a private conversation that we had, you mentioned this idea, this theme of always feeling limited, and how that started when you were younger, living outside of Alberta. Can you share a little bit more about this theme and how it plays out in your life?
So I was born in beautiful Nanaimo, British Columbia. For those listening, if you've ever been to Vancouver Island, it's a wonderful spot.
Mm-hmm.
I was born and raised there, and I lived there until I was 18.
Mm-hmm.
Growing up in a family of huge sports fans
Mm-hmm.
and very outdoorsy, active people, I sort of stuck out like a sore thumb in that kind of environment.
Mm-hmm.
And on the island, especially, I hear about all of my friends going to different like art high schools.
Mm-hmm.
You know what my high school was called going into Nanaimo? It was called Nanaimo District Secondary.
Mm-hmm.
So there wasn't a lot of huge variety.
Mm-hmm.
So as there were all these big, huge dreams I wanted to accomplish, the resources and the foundations to start building on those ideas when I was young were
Mm-hmm.
not around. And only until I moved away from Nanaimo, I felt very limited in my abilities. I felt very
Mm-hmm.
limited into what types of things I could actually accomplish in my life.
Right. Right. And has that theme of limitation, did it ever follow you?
It did.
Mm-hmm.
It did. I think it manifests itself back in a way where I felt limited through no external factor.
Mm-hmm.
During this time, I felt limited in just the things I could do,
Okay.
just in general.
Is there anything particular coming up for you that you can give as an example of like what kinds of things you felt like limited by or how the limitation was showing up? Because I think you mentioned how it wasn't so much external, but something you were still experiencing. So, what sort of prompts would you get?
That's a tough one. I think I was mostly limited by how I viewed myself as a person worthy of doing things.
Mm-hmm.
And it was things like, oh, am I worthy of cooking food or doing the laundry? You know,
Mm-hmm.
it was limiting. It was limiting my ability to be hygienic. It was limiting my ability to go out and be social,
Mm-hmm.
among many other things. So this theme of limitation, despite having different meanings, has always kind of stuck around.
Mm. Right. It's tampered with you.
Hmm.
Right. Okay. So, Dawson, there's actually something I'm curious about. When people come to see me for therapy, individuals are typically in one of three places. Some people are getting started where they're just trying to get their bearings, understand what they need to work on, or, do some sorting to understand where to begin uncovering their personal growth journey. Some people are in the middle. Maybe they're in the thick of things. Maybe there's an acute stressor that's kind of prompted them to start and navigate. And some people are looking back where they have worked on themselves or moved through a lot of things. But in order for them to move forward in life, they want to close a few chapters or get some closure, become a bit more reflective and contemplative. Where in the journey would you say that you are at this time? Would you say that you are getting started in the middle, or would you say that you're looking back?
I actually even want to say all three because I'm at a very, I want to say, volatile point in my life. It's my mid 20s. You know, everything's exciting. Everything moves quickly. So not only am I looking back, but I'm also in the thick of things, and I'm also just getting started.
So, I mean, I appreciate sharing that, in your 20s, feeling it's a volatile time, a lot of different things are shifting. But we're really talking about not just your journey of life, but this particular story where we're talking about this devastating combo, right, of family loss and this internal struggle that you were experiencing and the questioning of, am I made for this? This story. Would you
Mhm.
really say that you're in all three places for what you've just described today?
For this story, we're definitely looking back at it.
Looking back. Okay. And for looking back, I'm curious about what you want to remember about the process of your healing journey. If you're looking back, clearly there's been a number of steps that you've been through. And so, what would you want to remember about that process so that you can stay in this position of looking back?
The number one thing I think I took away from all of this was to go easy on myself,
Hmm.
which I want to make the distinction between be kind to yourself,
Hmm.
because I think being kind to yourself enforces sort of a bit of a toxic positivity thing where it's like, oh, be good to yourself, eat good food. You know, it's not super helpful to everyone. What was helpful to me was to just be a little bit easier on myself.
Like gentle.
Just be gentle. Exactly.
Hmm.
See the way things are happening as just a checkpoint,
Hmm.
what I like to call my big epic master plan.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. I like this. Checkpoints with your big, epic master plan.
Yeah.
Amazing. I think it's important. And I think it sounds like for you, language is important. For another person, being kind to yourself they might not have that perspective of, toxic positivity. But it seems like you were able to connect with messages that made sense for you, right? Like to go easy on yourself, being gentle. Sounds like you're really being genuine, authentic with yourself, really allowing yourself to be where you need to be and recognizing, taking that step back and saying, hey, you know what? In the grand scheme of things, my epic master plan has not failed. I'm still going there. I just might have to reroute or redirect myself, or we may have to go from a different angle. And so these are just
Exactly.
checkpoints. And it's kind of like giving yourself a bit of a reality check. I can still do this. This is
Yeah.
still a possibility, right?
Yeah. Being who I am, what I also learned in this time, going back on the language of things,
Hmm.
I hear a lot of people refer to mental health and mental well-being as a battle. And sometimes you win battles and sometimes you lose battles.
Right.
I like to think of my mental beauty timeline. This is fun. You're going to love this. I like to think of this sort of as a quest. It's a quest, and sometimes there are battles, but sometimes there's not. Maybe in a quest you're just waiting for something else to come up. Because when you talk about, mental health as a battle, I think it just puts a blanket term over it that the whole thing can either end up good or bad. You lose a battle or you win battles. I think when you're looking at a grand epic quest in a bigger scheme of things, it really gives it a little bit more abstraction.
And I like how you're expanding it and thinking bigger. So
Yeah.
it's not about, we often, when we talk about mental health in certain spaces, even in more comfortable spaces, others don't always respond the same way as you talk about sports or you talk about physical health or like going to the physiotherapist or the chiropractor or even a cardiologist, right? It's a very different kind of engagement and conversations than when we start talking about mental well-being. And so I think part of the stigmas, when we talk about stigmas that you and I were talking about earlier, it's like a skewed view, right? That mental health means not so good. Like, oh, we don't want to don't talk about mental health. Mental health means like I'm damaged goods or there's something wrong with me. If you think the words mental health are part of my repertoire, then that means you think something's wrong with me. There's so many different interpretations that are flawed that are being tossed around, right?
Yeah.
So I really like your idea of calling it a quest. So it's something beyond just evaluating this. We're taking it another step back and really looking at the umbrella. This is a quest. This is my quest. This is my journey. This is my goal. Here are the things I'm targeting. And I can still do these things. I'm just not there yet. So I just need to reframe and go, how else can I pivot? What else do I need to do to pivot to get there? And so I really appreciate that perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's also not all about constant action too. I acknowledge in my quest, sometimes there is just a bunch of doing nothing, and that is okay.
Yeah. Staying present, just being still in stillness.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So Dawson, we were going to bring back the piece about the depressive episode that you had been through. So something I always get curious about for all of the guests is how your untold story affected your mental health. And I know that you mentioned that you had this 6-month depressive episode. So I'm curious if you're now ready to share with us, with me, what that was all about.
Yeah, absolutely. So the way this manifested into my life was really a lack of motivation. It was lack of motivation to cook my own food. It was lack of motivation to go out to the grocery store. I think I mentioned before, hygiene took a plunge. Getting in the shower was just a thing I did not have the energy to do. I got tons of takeout. I was keeping myself alive, but at the bare minimum of what I was able to accomplish.
So kind of like survival mode. Like you're just
Exactly
trying to figure out what you needed to do to have your needs met, but they weren't maybe necessarily the best options or choices, but you were still doing it.
Yeah, I was keeping alive.
Yeah.
By any means possible.
Right. But the motivation, the energy, the ability, that stuff was not intact.
Yeah.
Okay. And what sort of toll did you notice that it took on your mind? Did you have like certain competing thoughts, inner thoughts that you experienced that were kind of occupying space?
Lots of competing thoughts. Absolutely. Lots of confusion. It's just waking up every day and just being so lost and so confused and so concerned what's going to happen.
When you say what's going to happen, meaning like for everything, or were you worried about school specifically, or were you worried about school, grandma, and the family, and how is life going to end up, or was it everything? Was it kind of like all those things, or were there other things?
just a general vagueness of everything that was happening in my life.
Mm-hmm.
What is happening? What's going to happen?
Mm-hmm. So future worries.
Yeah. What was even scarier at this time too is that I'm calling it a depressive episode
Mm-hmm.
only because I found out later that it
Mm-hmm.
was.
At the time, you didn't know what you were going through.
No.
Okay.
And so it was just happening, and I
Mm-hmm.
had found out, a friend of mine had informed me on
Mm-hmm.
the side effects and common symptoms of depression, and that made things even scarier
Right.
because now it was real, and now there was a word to it.
Mm-hmm. And what sorts of emotions did you experience? I know you mentioned feeling confused and lost, and there was feeling scared and worried. Were there other emotions that you were experiencing as well?
Um, yeah, feeling scared, lost, frightened.
Mm.
Frightened is one of them. I think those are the big three.
It's a big combination, though.
Yeah.
So here's something you may learn about Emotions 101. So, fear, the term fear, that emotion, when we think about the intensity of fear, there's different words we use to describe. So, when we say we're confused, I'm feeling confused, that is an extension of fear. It has to do with fear, but confusion is more low level. The intensity is much lighter. When you say frightened, that's pretty intensified. That's pretty intense. And when you say scared, it's pretty in between. So it sounds like fear was really big in your world,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Lots of
And
fear.
mourning.
Well, yeah. Well, worry is like what happens before it gets fearful, right? So you were kind of experiencing everything to do with fear on all levels.
Yeah.
Because I don't hear you talking to me about feeling angry or anything from that realm. But I'm sure that once you started to experience all this fear, it was probably very debilitating for you.
Yeah, it was. It was
Hmm.
fear, and it's a feeling of like uncomfort, I
Hmm.
guess. Not being comfortable with myself, not being comfortable with my body.
Was it like a restlessness or a different kind of, are you talking about a different kind of discomfort?
Like a lacking in confidence.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. That makes sense, right? Because if fear is taking over you, then you're going to now start questioning all sorts of things. So is that what happened? Is that your self-worth started to get questioned and or critiqued?
Yeah.
Mm.
And being in design school,
Mm-hmm.
I have hard evidence of the things I've done, and even just looking at the time, looking back at things,
Mm-hmm.
I said to myself, was it even good to begin with? Was there ever a point where I was doing well? Was
Mm-hmm.
there ever a point where I was actually making, good art?
Mm-hmm. And so when you're asking yourself these questions of, was I ever doing good work or making good art? That's questioning, like, am I successful? Can I do this? Am I in the right space? Like, is this something I should be pursuing? Like, if I don't pursue this, then what am I good at? This is all I have been focusing on. Is that the kind of stuff you were entertaining in your mind?
Exactly. Yeah. Like I had a vision.
Mm-hmm.
And when that ideal image of what you want to become crumbles, you'll really start to question the fundamentals.
Right. And by fundamentals, you mean like your own core.
Yeah, exactly.
Gosh, that must have been so stifling.
Yeah, yeah,
Right. And, it sounds like, well, you did go through all of these things. You also found your path and you found your way. So I'm really curious if you can share what is your key message to the listeners of the show? What do you want them to know?
you are important, and the things that make up your life are not meaningless, whatever that happens to be. I believe no one and nobody and anything that everyone does is not meaningless. Never.
Hmm. Okay. And it's when you say that no one is meaningless, I know that you're also encouraging people to know that they matter, that they count.
Yeah, absolutely. Like your existence is valuable. You are important. Yeah.
Okay. So, Dawson, I'm curious about what is your game changer inspiration that's close to you that reflects your untold story? Is there a quote or a book or a person or event or something that really spoke volumes to you when you were going through the turmoil that you shared with us? Something that helped you pivot?
Yeah. As I was going through this, and this is the most untold part of the story. As I was going into this, I grew a love for. This is gonna be so funny coming out of my mouth. I grew a love for the Muppets and
Okay.
Jim Henson. And I learned about Jim Henson and I learned about his story. And he's got a quote, and I've got it right here. And it
Okay.
says, "Life's like a movie, write your own ending. Keep believing, keep pretending."
Mm-hmm. Right.
And that is really important for me.
Right. And that's what got you through.
Yeah.
You literally focused on these words.
Yeah. I think it's a very particular case for me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But the more I can imagine and the more I can pretend and envision all the stuff that I want to do
Mm-hmm.
keeps me going.
Yeah. And you're going places. There's things happening, there's movement happening. So
I'm trying. Yeah.
it
Yeah,
definitely worked.
I think so.
Yeah. So, what's a cause or an organization that's been impactful to you on your journey that you would like to give a shout out to?
Oh, I am shouting out my dear friend Allie Towns
Mm-hmm.
and Allie Towns and their TikTok account. Allie's a rocket launcher, and I have learned so much from them. And their TikTok is amazing. It's a mental health content focused TikTok.
Awesome.
And so there is pretty constantly new content coming out
Mm-hmm.
about their story, about different people's stories,
Mm-hmm.
and it's been inspirational.
Wicked. That's amazing.
Yeah,
So, Ellie Towns, advocate of mental health. That's fantastic. All right.
yeah.
Well, that's where the shout out goes to. That's fantastic. All right. And Dawson, how can people connect with you if they would like to? Where are you findable?
So I I'd like to be found on Instagram. We're Playmix Inc. on Instagram, and that's where we share a lot of the toy company stuff. My personal account, I'm more than open to talk about what I've gone through. I am Dawson Wood is my Instagram account,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm also on LinkedIn as well. And we've got a website.
That's perfect. I believe we've grabbed all of your information. So that should be included in your show notes page. So people
Sweet.
will be able to connect with you, connect with your story, things that you're passionate about, reach out to you if they are feeling they want to either learn more about your story or maybe they have a question for something that they're trying to pursue, whatever it may be. You never know who you might hear from.
Yeah. As well, real quickly, because I am shameless, Red Boy and the Adventure Crew is my first game coming out soon. We're going to be starting a Kickstarter in August or September, and I'm very, very excited for that as well.
Amazing. Okay. So, Dawson, guess what? You've just dared yourself to share. Congratulations.
Sweet. Did I win?
I think it's
Please say yes, please say yes, please say yes.
yes, you've won the token of
Yes.
courage.
Perfect. I'm going to frame it.
Dawson, I would just like to take a moment to express my gratitude for the story that you've shared today about the imposter syndrome, the survival mode, the simultaneous grief journey, all the internal tumultuous dialogue, all of that of which you endured and you shared the pain points of. I'm truly grateful to have been able to hear and witness your story today. So thank you for the deep conversation and for all the daring and sharing.
Of course. Yeah. Thank you for your space. Thank you for listening. This has been wicked.
Amazing. And once again, Dawson, thank you for being part of Dare to Share Your Untold Story and helping to be a voice in breaking down the barriers of mental stigma. To all of our listeners, if you like what you've been hearing on this podcast and you want to be part of breaking down barriers of mental stigma, I invite you to go wherever you are listening to the episode and hit subscribe. Leave us a comment or a review of the episode and maybe how you relate to it. To learn more about what we offer, visit www.daretoheal.co. And if you are feeling ready and brave to share, please submit your story by visiting www.daretoshare.co. Thanks for joining in.